Hello and a very warm welcome to Policy Watch, our weekly program that keeps you abreast of all the main economic developments during the week. As always, we'll be taking up three stories. We start with the Prime Minister finally indicating his willingness to allow 100% foreign direct investment in telecom and a hike in the FDI ceiling in a number of other sectors as well. We then move on to the government's efforts, doubtless belated, to boost the manufacturing sector. And finally, we close with a story on the rather surprising results of the recent National Sample Survey. Joining me in these discussions is Himanshu Vats, Senior Journalist, Economic Times. Welcome to the show, Himanshu.
Thank you.
The Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, has backed the Finance Ministry and the Industry Ministry's department plan to raise the FDI ceiling in telecom to 100%, besides allowing overseas flows into several sectors without prior government approval. The go-ahead for a higher cap in telecom is seen as crucial for sending a signal to overseas investors. The issue had turned particularly contentious after the Home Ministry raised security concerns. It was not alone in its opposition. The Ministries of Defence and Space have also expressed reservation on allowing 100% FDI in sensitive sectors like telecom. But the move on telecom can set the tone for a more liberal limit in defence production as well. Although the Defence Minister, A.K. Antony, has opposed higher foreign investment in defence, citing vulnerabilities, he has left the door open for allowing 26% FDI, more than 26% FDI in fact, based on a case-to-case clearance by the Cabinet Committee on Security. Will the government's new openness to FDI change anything, or has it come too late to make a difference?
India is all set to announce a more liberal foreign direct investment regime this month. Telecom Commission has already recommended 100% FDI in telecom sector. The recommendation is likely to sail through as it has the backing of all major ministries. The decision is aimed at wooing foreign investors in one of the fastest growing telecom markets in the world. Recently, a committee headed by Economic Affairs Secretary Arvind Mayaram had recommended a liberal FDI regime for sectors including defence. The committee recommended raising of the FDI limit in multi-brand retail to 74% and up to 49% for various other sectors through automatic route. The government is also working on proposals to allow FDI in oil and gas refining, courier services and commodity and power exchanges through automatic route. However, the Defence and Home Ministries and the Department of Space have expressed reservations over the proposal to allow 100% FDI. Defence Minister A.K. Antony is also not keen to open defence production for FDI beyond 26%. The Prime Minister is keen to push through insurance and pension bills to allow more foreign investment in these sectors. However, it is unlikely to get Parliament's approval in the remaining term of the government. But liberal FDI regimes in sectors such as telecom can be done through executive decisions. Bringing more FDI is crucial for financing the huge current account deficit. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Himanshu, the government has suddenly kind of stirred into action as far as foreign direct investment is concerned. Will it really make a difference? Or take telecom, for instance. Given the mess that there is in the telecom sector, from sunrise to sunset sector almost, will this 100% make a difference at all?
See, if you look at it overall, it certainly is necessary in terms of investor sentiment and to make a difference. India got many accolades from potential investors and the world over when we opened up foreign direct investment in retail, for example. So that's one side of the story. The other side is I don't fully agree with people who say that this is important for growth, because India has seen 8 to 9% growth for about 3 years, more than 9% growth. And that was in the existing regime before all this was opened up. So I believe growth is possible, economy can do well without all this also. But in the current environment, I think it's very necessary. I think India, worldwide, the emerging markets are being downgraded a bit. And therefore, you can't just expect people to keep pouring dollars into India. We have a current account deficit, so we need those dollars. So India needs to be a little more competitive, a little more attractive to the investors. And to that extent, I think this is very necessary.
But is it the low ceiling, even if you accept that the ceiling was a problem? Is it the ceiling so much that was a problem? Or is it the flip-flop in policy, the uncertainty, like we've seen in FDI in retail? The government opened up and then put in so many caveats, which is why we really haven't seen very much progress on that side. So
yeah, you're entirely right, because from a business perspective, what a company or an industrialist or an investor is looking forward to, what he needs is some policy certainty. They can face all kinds of risks, but not a uncertainty risk. So if the policy regime is very clear, it can be 70%, it can be 80%, it can be 51%. But as long as they have faith in that once they put the money, there should not be a fear of the unknown. So to that extent, I agree with you. And that's what I meant when I said, India has seen much higher growth, much more investment in the past, when there was much more faith in the policy direction and continuity.
The world was also a different place at that time. We didn't have this kind of slowdown. We didn't have the kind of worries that we have on the macroeconomic side, not only in India, but all over the world. So that time there was money willing to come in. We had the BRICS, the great story of the BRICS, and India's shining story, whereas now it's pretty much quite different. So given this kind of scenario, particularly if you look at, say, telecom, I mean, there is complete fuzziness on, where is the government going? What is the policy headed? Where is it headed? So in that kind of scenario, 100% FDI, will it really change things at all?
And if you're saying whether increasing the investment limit would change the fuzziness in policy, probably not. But the positive thing is the government is making this effort to reach out to investors. That many of them want 100%, and there have been reports that they're using all kinds of means to actually control close to 100% with some clandestine shareholder agreements, etc., etc. So it's very good to be very transparent and do that. And there's always this light at the end of the tunnel kind of a situation. Once you've gone through all this mess, so the investors, the regulators, the government, the companies, the operators, they know what the problems are. And if the government is trying to sort things out, I think once this mess has crossed over, I think things can look pretty positive.
And the security concerns, are they overdone?
I think a bit.
Telecom?
I don't see how 75% foreign ownership is less of a security threat than 100%, or 100 is more than 70%.
So we're talking about defense, where you say anything over 26%. Would that be dangerous?
See, the limit per se I don't think is dangerous as long as it is properly regulated and monitored. Other countries also do it. You have a lot of private initiatives in defense the world over, in the United States. So it's pretty doable. The concerns, yes, I mean, I would expect the Defense Ministry to be cautious. It's just like, if it's an army area and if you're walking past, you'll be questioned, you'll be asked where you come from, what you're doing. To that extent, in defense production, you would need that caution.
That additional caution.
Yeah.
But what held the government back? These are executive decisions, except for insurance, pension, etc. These could have been taken by the government earlier also. So why were they so hesitant?
Well, finally, it's a play of democracy. It's like there are a whole lot of executive decisions that can be taken. The recent gas price is one, you don't have to go to parliament. But whether the decision is executive or legislative or judicial, it has a huge political fallout. So, the government in a democracy, which is heading for so many assembly elections and finally a general election next year, they would be cautious.
Okay, on that note, I think we'll take a break. But please do stay with us. We'll soon be back. Welcome back. The low and declining share of manufacturing in India's GDP has been a cause for serious concern. If we wish to provide employment to our youth and make best use of the window of opportunity that is open to us to take advantage really of our demographic dividend and ensure that it does not become a demographic liability, the manufacturing sector must grow. This is because it is manufacturing alone that can create blue-collar jobs on the necessary scale. The government has a stated objective of raising manufacturer share in GDP to 25%, but we've not made any progress on that front. It is therefore good that a committee headed by the PM has called for concerted efforts to boost manufacturing. The committee has set targets for the steel and textile sector and has also decided to develop a 70 to 100-seater aircraft indigenously. But before we go into the details, let's hear this report.
Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has announced an ambitious program to boost manufacturing in the country. He has set a target of $34 billion for textile exports, which is 30% of the country's total exports. Domestic steel production capacity would be augmented by 300 million tons per annum. The centre will float special purpose vehicles with the state governments for this purpose. The Prime Minister has also approved the development of an indigenous civilian aircraft with a seating capacity of 70 to 100 passengers. The indigenous aircraft project will utilise offsets available through massive defence imports and help domestic capability in production of cutting-edge avionics. In a high-level meeting convened this week, Dr. Singh expressed unhappiness over India still being a laggard in manufacturing sector. He told bureaucrats and industry bodies that the country cannot afford to keep producing low-end products and rely on imports. He was critical of India's export that is largely composed of raw materials and low-end products. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Himanshu, you heard that report. If you were to put your finger on it, what really ails the manufacturing sector in India? Why is the share of manufacturing in GDP so low, between 15 to 17% is what we say, as against Thailand's 40%, China's 34%. So what really is wrong with our manufacturing sector?
See, there are plenty of things. I would start with, the difficulty in starting a business in India. I think India's global ranking is abysmal there.
Yeah, 132 out of 185 or something.
So it might be even worse. I don't know the exact number. So, when you talk of manufacturing, it's not just the big companies setting up plants, which is very important, but it has to be across the board. Right. There's need for companies to grow. You have reserved some very important sectors only for the small scale, so there's no incentive for them to grow either, because then they'll come out of that. So that's one. Second is actually a slightly positive thing. We've had fairly good growth in services. So the extent to which that is reducing the share of manufacturing, I have no problem with that. Services growth is very important. But the country cannot depend on that for improving the standard of living of the masses, because it's a very urban phenomenon. If you look at IT services, it's basically held Bangalore, maybe Hyderabad, and a few pockets here and there. So manufacturing is important. The other issue is, there seems to be a breach of faith between government and business. The companies are not ready to set up projects. There are interest rates, there are all kinds of issues. But the willingness to invest in India, a growing number of big companies are choosing to invest abroad. If you look at the oil and gas sector, the amount of money invested in countries around the world is far more than the investing side. So it's the overall business climate that needs to improve, the ease of business, and industrialists need at least a little bit of flexibility in labor. And I think with so many subsidy schemes coming, whether it is Narega and the Food Security Bill, that should give the government some latitude to allow some flexibility in labor, because if there is, with the help of these schemes, you won't be dumping them nowhere. So all this combination, I think, is important.
I think the government has been trying very hard. They talked about a national manufacturing policy. They said you must raise a share of manufacturing in GDP to 25%, because if you look at employment particularly, the manufacturing share in employment is just 12% in India. It's 28% in China. And our biggest problem really is to give jobs to our boys and girls. So what can the government do? They've announced many things in the national manufacturing policy. What are the concrete things, 2, 3, 4, if you could list it out?
See, one thing to remember is that just the central government policy is not enough. Because finally these companies need to acquire land in a state and deal with the state governments. And as of now, we've got 2 or 3 states which companies like to invest in, and basically Western India, Maharashtra, Gujarat, and to some extent a few others. So just a national policy alone is not enough. Finally, it has to be a center-state initiative. The center needs to sit down with some chief ministers, and they need to give certain guarantee that, okay, if there's a project, we'll be able to do this, and then abide by that. What happens very often is a company has an investment plan, and once they try to set up the plant in the state, there are all kinds of obstacles. At times, there are genuine concerns of the local people. At times, there are political interests or vested interests who try to almost blackmail the company that you should do this. So, and it again comes down to ease of doing business, because, as far as the company is concerned, their incentive is that, okay, we should be able to invest and make some money. That is a problem. Second, I think companies need to be more willing to accept competition. One of the things that's happened after so many years of liberalization is that the accumulation of wealth in a limited number of hands has perhaps increased according to some studies. Whereas after more than 20 years of liberalization, there should be many more new companies coming to the top. But it remains a little exclusive club, which do not like each other to grow. And that, in a sense, affects the entire manufacturing sector.
Okay, as you said, Himanshu, you're very right that manufacturing happens at the state level. It's not at the center. The center has come up with something like a national investment in manufacturing zones. They want to promote something on the lines of the SEZs. But if you see recently what's happened, the government is thinking of scrapping the SEZ policy completely. So what is wrong? Is the policy wrong? The way we implement it, is it wrong? What is really wrong with the policy? And can we expect the new manufacturing zones to do any better than the SEZs?
See, policy-wise, I don't think that things fundamentally wrong. It finally comes down to implementation and governance, sometimes at the central level, sometimes at the state level, sometimes at the district level. As far as our laws and policies are concerned, as I've said a couple of times, that within our existing laws and framework, India has seen some very good economic growth in the past, helped by global factors, as you pointed out. So, I won't blame it entirely on policies. It comes down to governance and implementation. And unlike certain countries where the entire system is determined to get a company to come and invest. And what you hear from companies in India is that that's not really the case, and there are many agencies or individuals who will say, what's in it for me? I think that's a big obstacle here.
Like in the case we saw of the Shingur, Tata and Shingur. So certainly it is the state government's attitude, the political, sentiment in the state that makes a difference.
Even if, if one is to be charitable to the West Bengal government and say they had some genuine problems, but you had another state which had this approach, okay, you come here, what do you want?
But competition should have been good. How come it didn't make West Bengal say, no, please don't go away. It means jobs for our people. What is it that is holding back these governments?
Because it did not mean votes from our people. There was some public resentment in that area. There were some allegations of problems in land acquisition, whether a particular party had been favored and supporters of a particular party, their land was not acquired. I don't know what's the truth, but certainly the state saw much more political gain from letting them go than in keeping them back.
So it's clearly a very complicated problem. But on that note, we'll take a break once again. But please don't go away. We have lots more after the break. Welcome back. National Sample Survey data often throws up surprises. The latest round, the 68th round, is no exception. Strange as it may sound, the data reveals that households in half the states and territories spend more on tobacco, alcohol and pan than on education. We'll go into greater detail, especially on the state-wise numbers. But before we do that, let's hear this Bureau report.
In rural India, at least families in half of the states and union territories are spending more money on tobacco and alcohol products than on education. Oddly enough, the list contains the names of at least 3 states and territories that have officially banned sale and consumption of alcohol. These are Gujarat, Mizoram and Lakshadweep. Even for rural India as a whole, there are marginal differences on money spent on education and on intoxicants. In 2011-12, rural households spent 46 rupees per month on alcohol, tobacco and pan, and only 50 was spent on education. This trend of spending more on intoxicants rather than education was observed in both poor and prosperous states alike. Both in Odisha and Gujarat, rural households spend more on alcohol and tobacco than on education. Andhra Pradesh and Jharkhand were worst performers in this regard. In Andhra Pradesh, average rural households spent 59 rupees on studies and 89 on intoxicants per month. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Himanshu, what explains these rather unbelievable kind of numbers? Is it because in India, especially rural India, we have such grinding poverty that the only way you can get through life is to get intoxicated?
Well, that's really a sad story of this country. But, those numbers are sad, but not very surprising. In many cultures, it's maybe it's the first generation which has got schools in the village. In some cases, maybe the second generation. And very often, the rewards of schooling have not been such that, the rest of the society says, okay, this fellow went to school and is doing so well in life. So there isn't all that much incentive. But really, it is a social problem.
But one always heard that in India, people, parents attach a great deal of importance to children's education, which is why very often when you have a private school and a public school, parents go out of their way to send their children to the private school, even though it costs them much more, particularly what they call the so-called English medium school. So doesn't this kind of run counter to that logic? Why does that, what explains it?
I think what you're saying is much more urban and semi-urban phenomenon.
Okay.
Because that's where you've seen that, so-and-so went to this great private school and is doing so well in life, earning so much more. Another person went to the neighborhood government school and is not doing well in life. So there's a demonstration effect. In an interior rural area where there's not even a road, there may not be a school, or there might be some worthless school, where, there's so many schools which don't even have a building. There might be a tent, there might be just one teacher. And obviously a student going there would not have gained very much, whereas another family where the same student has been contributing to the farm or something might have done better. I don't know.
We're just surmising, yes.
Yeah.
Because particularly since the government has passed this wonderful legislation called Right to Education, what does it mean at the end of the day? Because the idea is that you should get free schooling from the ages of 6 to 14. So, if people are at the moment, presumably the right to education is not translated into ensuring that you have schools, you have infrastructure. But if this is the kind of priority that people place to education, then what use is the right to education really?
Well, in a national sense, I would still say it is early days for right to education. I think the government needs to do much, much more for education. The sad thing is the government school, the amount of money that goes into it, the kind of, the salaries, the dearness allowance, and eventually retirement benefits they have. The much better schools are actually paying the teachers much less.
True.
So, it's a season of saying this scam, that scam. I think education, without having high-profile kind of cases, but in a sense, it is a kind of a scam. There's a huge amount of national money going into it, and these schools are not delivering. Now, if you had government schools in order, where if a child gets into that school and comes out and gets a good job, it will be a very obvious incentive that, instead of having another drink, why don't I put my child in school? But
on that note, Himanshu, we'll have to come to the end of this program. It's been great having you. Thank you so much. But before we close the show completely, let's take a look at the key takeaways. As far as FDI is concerned, Himanshu was of the view that yes, the government need not be so wary about raising the ceilings. We need FDI desperately, and the good thing is to go ahead with safeguards if necessary. On manufacturing, he felt it was a center-state partnership. Unless both get into the act and make it easier for businessmen to set up businesses, it's going to be very difficult for manufacturing to take off. As far as the rather peculiar results of the 68th NSS survey show us, the view was really that education is a very important business. We cannot really leave it entirely to the private sector. The state must get into it. And with things like right to education, maybe school vouchers, things will hopefully change. And with that, we come to the end of this show. It's been great having you. Please don't forget, we'll be back next week, same time. Thank you.